Welcome to another Legal Tech Talks. My name is Frances Anderson and I'm the MD of Net Law Media. I'm delighted to introduce the first Legal Tech Talk for 2021, which again will deliver a thought-provoking session on collaboration, unleashing a new wave of data-driven innovation. So this session today will explore a new cross-sector consortium of major businesses and universities set to provide the key to the suffocating challenge of data access for regulated industries through a responsible AI-powered industry-agnostic platform, the AIR platform. Now, this session today is going to be chaired by David Fasackley. Now, David, who many of you know and some who may not, has been in the legal IT for the last 15 years, previously as the Chief Information Officer at MW Solicitors, during which time he demonstrated his proficiency in driving business transformation, delivering business revenue growth and new client services, reducing operating costs, driving profitability, and facilitating rapid growth. Joining CTS in July 2020 as the company's in-house legal chief information officer, he's responsible for assisting CTS in further driving alignment of their service offerings to the unique needs of the legal sector. So before I hand over to our esteemed guests and the chair of today's roundtable, as we're live, we're encouraging all of you listening today to ask questions live to the panel via the different functions. So one of which is the Q&A. Click your name in the participants to raise your hand if you want to ask a question live. Absolutely welcome. We'll welcome you to join in. And then what we'll do is we will then pull you in Dave, and you'll be able to join the discussion with the panelists and Dave. Or alternatively, put your question into the chat window. Now, through today's session, as I said, do ask your questions throughout the flow and then we'll be monitoring them and we look forward to your engagement. Now, without further ado, I welcome David Fasackley, who will run through today's roundtable discussion.
Well, thank you, Frances. Hello and welcome, everyone. As Frances said, it's our first Tech Talk of 2021. I'm Dave Fasackley, the CIO at CTS, and it's my pleasure to be here with you all and to chair today's session. Just like Frances said, I'm going to encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. Don't feel like you need to hold them up. We have great content. We have great speakers. I'm sure you will want to contribute as they inspire you as we go through today's sessions. I'll do my best to take those questions and pose them at the right point to our esteemed panel. So get writing, be keyboard warriors. That's what we want. So Legal Tech Talk, collaboration, unleashing a new wave of data innovation. So let's explore that a little before we get into the panel. So as law firms, we possess a lot of data. We have a lot of our clients' data. We need to share data in order to practice law and to see the best outcomes for our clients. What we do, though, and how we do it is highly regulated here in the UK and globally. Think the SRA, think GDPR, but sometimes there's not always an overarching governing authority. International arbitration, perhaps being one example we will explore in that. So how do we unleash the power of the data that we hold? How do we access other people's data? And how do we stick by the rules as we do that? What are the business cases for doing this? And how can law firms collaborate and come together with others to create solutions that work for everyone and in the right way? Now, lucky for us, we've got this great panel to inform us, inspire us, and lead us into this discussion. And we're going to learn and hear about two quite distinctive legal industry-led projects. The first one, a collaboration of law firms that came together to try and provide clarity, protocols, and process and policy for using tech, using software, using solutions, accessing data in the world of international arbitration. If we think that the UK only regulators are sometimes difficult to deal with, imagine how much more difficult that can be when we cross borders and we deal with different governing bodies. We're going to explore that. And secondly, we're going to take a look at a technology-based AI design, data sharing, data access solution, the AIR platform, and how law firms are using this tech to transform how we use, share, access, and benefit from the power of data. And perhaps we'll explore, in fact, we will explore such questions as, are law firms allowed to actually do this? Well, we'll explore that and some of the other various bits and pieces behind it. So first of all, let me introduce our fantastic panel. First of all, and I know you're all going to cheer and scream behind the cameras, we're going to feel this wave of love and affection coming from you. I encourage you to do that at home. First of all, we have Maria Scott, who, having trained at DLA Piper, has been with the firm for over 8 years. She's a senior associate in the DLA Piper's litigation and arbitration team, and she specializes in international arbitration. Experience for Maria includes disputes related to gas pricing, joint venture agreements, other commercial contracts, with a particular emphasis on the energy sector, as well as matters contractual and claims of fraud or misrepresentation. She's represented clients for leading arbitration institutions such as the LCIA, the ICC, the SEC, and in proceedings before the High Court of England and Wales. She is a member of the cross-firm working group on legal tech adoption in international arbitration. Here's a fun fact about Maria. When she was younger, she had a music teacher who was a former world whistling champion. I don't want to hear any laughter. Okay, it's very serious this. World whistling champion, who is also the man whistling in the Lloyd's TSP adverts. That is a claim, Maria. Absolutely wonderful. So we move on to Mafanwi Wood, who's a partner at Ashurst. Again, part of the international arbitration team there. MIF has a broad practice and particular experience also in the global energy disputes area, including oil and gas, renewables, and African-related disputes. She has experience in other markets, including Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. MIF advises in relation to commercial arbitration, investor-state disputes, and public international law, and has a range of experience with major international institutional ad hoc arbitration. She's listed as a rising star on the 2009 Legal 500 arbitration power list and in the 2020 and 21 Legal 500 rankings. In fact, the Legal 500 quotes that Mafanwi Wood is a true powerhouse. I'm sitting here intimidated, Mif. I'm absolutely intimidated. Clients and counsel alike love her efficiency and ability to focus on the essential elements of a case and drive it forward. And she's also, along with Maria, a member of the working group on legal tech adoption and international arbitration. And she has regularly authors articles in Butterworth's Journal of International Banking and Financial Law. So welcome, Mif, good to see you. Sally Sphere-Tate is the founder and CEO of data platform company Regulation and its privacy-preserving data access platform, the AIR platform that we're going to hear about in a few minutes. She is a qualified barrister. She's ex-general counsel, ex-head of compliance, an ex-regulator, and a UCL research fellow and a published author. So Sally has worked on the core ideas that underpin these interconnected worlds of law, regulation, and technology. So Sally, great to have you with us. And finally, but by no means least, we have Tara Waters, who is, like Mafanwi, a partner at Ashurst and is head of Ashurst Advanced Digital, which is the technology arm of their new law division, which is called Ashurst Advanced. Tara is actually a non-traditional lawyer. She's worked in technology development for 7 years before switching careers into law, which is a little unusual because people tend to do it the other way, become lawyers first and then they get out and do something else. Well, Tara's done the other way. And in her current role, she's been able to merge her experience to focus on how best to leverage technology to improve and evolve the delivery of legal services and solutions to clients. And here's another fun fact about Tara. Tara was previously the drummer in an all-girl indie rock band in New York City. So there we go. That's top trumps for Tara, I think, on everybody else for that. So welcome, panel, welcome all. I'll encourage you now at this point to sort of go off mute as I invite you to speak. And we're going to start with Mif and Maria on the protocol for online case management in international arbitration. Tell us all about it.
Thanks very much, David. Well, the protocol on technology and international arbitration is pretty much what it says on the box. It is a protocol which we have developed, which governs the online management of disputes, but in particular the online management of platforms in arbitration. Now, I'll take a step back for those on the call who may not be familiar with arbitration. Arbitration, in very simple terms, is just an alternate form of dispute resolution. It's conducted in a very similar manner to litigation, but instead of a state-appointed judge, you will have often a three-person tribunal. It could be a one-person tribunal, and that tribunal is usually selected by the parties themselves. So very similar to litigation, but just a party-driven process. Now, when we're talking about this protocol governing online management of arbitration, we specifically focused on the use of online platforms in arbitration. And online platforms, we're referring to software that enables participants in arbitration to store, share, manage, edit case-related documents and other data in a single shared repository. So it's software that's designed to be used throughout the whole arbitration process, so not just for the purpose of the hearing. Now, if we go back, the reason that we think that the protocol, we think it's so exciting, is that it is an industry first. It aims to be a standard industry best practice of online case management in arbitration. It's an example of the use of innovation and technology in arbitration, and it's a successful collaboration. And it's a successful collaboration not just between law firms, but also between lawyers, tech specialists, and process managers. So in short, it's a product of a collaboration between 6 law firms and our working group in the future of tech in international arbitration. So the issues it aims to address are issues that we had identified as regularly coming up in arbitration, given the increased use of technology. So arbitrations, as David alluded to before, especially international arbitrations, there's no one governing body. And different parties, different institutions in different jurisdictions were using different forms of technology, whether this be for email communications, data storage, service of documents, online hearing bundles, or virtual hearings themselves. Now, what that meant was that there was a couple of issues that arose, well, primary issues. And the first was efficiency. With all of these different technologies being used for different purposes, sometimes it was almost counter to making the process efficient. There was no agreed kind of protocol really as to how this would all work together, and a lot of the technologies often didn't work together. The other big issue that we spotted was cybersecurity. And as everyone on this call probably is very, very conscious of, you're only as safe as your weakest link. And so even, you know, the biggest law firms putting together all of the cybersecurity measures possible, that would all fail if you were sending something perhaps to an arbitrator who was using a Hotmail account on an iPad that they would lend to their grandson every weekend. So this use of different technologies had these two, issues that arose. So we got together and we thought, well, how can we address this? And I'll let Maria go into more of the detail about how we did this, but it was basically meeting up for over a year to find a solution and coming up with this protocol. So the protocol itself is about 40 pages in length. It is designed to have universal application and be useful for all different types of arbitrations. So small arbitrations, large arbitrations, arbitrations involving states, private parties, different jurisdictions. It's designed to be a universal guide. Importantly, it's also designed to be practical. Now, I'm definitely not going to go through everything the protocol contains because I'm not just conscious of time, but also tolerance levels for such detail. But I will say, it is practical. It deals with a spectrum of online case management platforms. It contains things like lists of must-haves, nice-to-haves, and just, very, very easy to use guidance. And it is designed for all participants in international arbitration, but it's importantly also designed for technology providers so that they have a blueprint which sets out exactly what participants in international arbitration need in terms of technology. And I'll pass over now to Maria to just delve into a few of those ideas in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Miff. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on, as Miff said, how we got to this protocol and some of the interesting things that we learned along the way. So in the first instance, the idea of putting together a protocol itself, and this was actually sort of the main challenge that we faced as a group when we came together, and that was determining what our ultimate objective would be. So we'd all sat down, we'd identified that we recognised similar issues that we all wanted to resolve. We were very enthusiastic, we were pretty confident we could achieve something, but we needed to work out what that was. And so we spent a few months, as Miff said, discussing various alternatives. At one point, for a while, actually, we considered whether it might be possible to develop our own software that would address all of our concerns and be basically our go-to in these arbitration proceedings. But ultimately, we had to be realistic. It was obviously not going to be possible to do that in our desired timeframe. And I think also we had to accept that, you know, let's leave the technology development to the experts in technology development. And when it came to our group, so lawyers and our process specialists and others, we identified that something we could usefully work towards was the gap in guidance that Miff has already mentioned. And that's why we decided to put together this protocol. And in terms of how we did that, so the first thing to note is, as Miff said, this is a group not just of lawyers. So we're joined by process and technology specialists within our firms, and they helped us along the way with things like mapping the process of an arbitration. That helped us identify the pressure points at which issues arise so that we could work out whether we could resolve those issues. They also helped us in essentially translating the lawyers' needs into requirements that technology providers can understand and work with. And that was really useful. And we also have individuals from our firms who are responsible for driving change and innovation. And we all have slightly different names for those roles. But essentially, they helped us not just get together in the beginning, but also, you know, they helped us, you know, put together some internal timelines. They kept us to task. They made sure that things didn't slip, and they just generally kept the process going. And that was really helpful. Can't really go much further without making a big deal of the fact that this is a collaboration between essentially competing law firms, and that kind of collaboration in fact even has its own word, which I didn't know beforehand. It's co-opetition. Very nice. And quite early on we identified that this had a number of advantages. So in the first instance, fairly obviously, instead of just one law firm, we're 6 law firms. We have a greater combined weight. And when we're talking to others in the international arbitration community, whether it's arbitral institutions or technology providers, coming as a group reflects a consensus between us and shows a commitment and also a dedication to that change that we're proposing. It also meant we could share our experiences. We've touched on that already. We were all experiencing the same thing, and we could pool our knowledge and also our contacts. And also, when it came to the end result, you know, working together means that hopefully we can reflect a consensus of opinion that should hopefully increase the appeal of the protocol and encourage its use. And then finally, in terms of this introductory piece, I just wanted to touch on the consultation that went into this process of putting together this protocol. So a key feature, as we've mentioned a few times now, is that we want this to be of universal application. And so we wanted to ensure we had as much backing from the community as possible. And as law firms, we work all over the world. We work for parties all over the world. We work in different jurisdictions. And one of the features of arbitration is there are multiple arbitration institutions and organizations who essentially offer the same or competing services. And so we can never and we will never express a preference between them. What we did instead was make sure we had as much of them behind us as possible, as many of them inputting into that process. And so we did that by 2 rounds of consultation. The first you could probably call like a private round, for want of a better word really, which meant us as a group reaching out to institutions, organizations, arbitrators, individuals we know are interested in this area, and asking for their input and their feedback. And that was super useful, particularly early on in the sort of process. And then secondly, from June to October last year, we published the draft protocol online for public consultation. So anyone and everyone who wanted to get in touch could do. And that process, I think we probably expected a little bit more feedback than we did, in fact, receive. That might be because we'd been really good at identifying anyone who was interested in the first round, and so they'd already spoken to us. But it might also be a point for us to take away as a group. We might want to think about how we could have been a bit more proactive, perhaps, in that process. But those are just some of the things I wanted to point out at the beginning. Hopefully that was useful.
It was, thank you, Maria, Myth, and actually it's triggered a few questions which I'll try and put to you now. Is it co-opetition? Is that the phrase you said there? Have I got that right? That is very interesting, because one of the questions we're curious as to how it started, because you are competitors. First of all, who are the six, and how did it just begin right at the beginning? How did that get going? Can you illuminate that a little bit?
Sounds like the beginning of the Bible.
Beginning.
In the beginning. Maria, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, watch me forget the six law firms now. Okay, so DLA Piper and Ashurst, we're both here. CMS, Cameron McKenna, Allswang Navarro, have I got that right? Latham and Watkins, Herbert Smith Freehills, and Hogan Lovells. Yep, you got it. Got them all. Brilliant.
Nailed it. Well done, Maria.
Thanks. I've only been working on it for 18 months to years at the time. And in terms of how we came together, I briefly touched on it. Basically, this is where those individuals I spoke about, who are responsible for driving change, really came to the fore. Basically, they spoke to each other. They had a chat. They realised between themselves that we were all, as firms, dealing with similar issues. And they said, shall we get together and talk about this? And that it was quite an organic process in that way. But thinking about it, I mean, it's something that as lawyers, we all knew we were dealing with these issues. But day to day, when you're working on a case, when you're very busy, it's quite difficult to take a step back and think, hang on, we need to sort of tackle this at a higher level instead of just fixing it for the moment. And so that was where that input was really useful. And then once the group was in place, if you like, a feature of international arbitration that comes from the fact that, as Myth said, it's party-led, is the fact that we're very used to speaking to our opponents and organising the hearing, organising the proceedings, agreeing a timetable. These are all things that we do all the time, even with our opposing party. And so it was quite natural, actually, the process of discussion and getting the group together. And we actually had...
Actually, it's natural. There's a natural collaboration because of the nature of your work. And it sounds like a shared frustration amongst your peers and colleagues, which is the element that actually brought you together. How do we fix this thing which we're all enduring? One of the other questions then opens it up a little further, which is how do you go beyond the six? How is the protocol, how was it received? Do you expect more to come on board? What's the next steps? And is it enforceable in any way? Is it suggestive? Is it a recommendation? Because you are law firms that have put this together, are there regulators or other bodies that need to really give this the stamp of approval? Where do you think we are there?
I think that's the question, isn't it? And in terms of, so if we go back just to in terms of enforceability, for want of a better word, and how are we going to, encourage everyone to adopt it? Well, as has already been said, international arbitration doesn't have an overarching kind of regulatory body or institution. And it really is, it's very organic, and it's very much based on, relations and also what works well. Now, in terms of a protocol like this, what we would aim to kind of happen in the future is that, because it's so useful, that parties increasingly adopt it as their go-to when they're putting together their arbitration. So when they're deciding party to party, how are we going to run this arbitration? what's going to happen, how we're going to deal with our documents and all the technology. What we're aiming for is parties to say, well, look, these guys have put together this protocol. It's pretty robust. It looks good. Let's adopt that. And then the more that keeps happening organically, it just becomes second nature then, and also almost part and parcel of arbitration to say, well, let's refer to the protocol and technology. Now, how do we get to that point? Well, this is where what Maria was talking about before, about having institutions on board and consultation periods, is really, really important. So yes, we're only 6 firms, but along the whole way, we made it an absolute priority to ensure that the arbitration community had absolute buy-in, and we were doing something that they wanted, that they were supportive of, so that they could have a kind of stake in the outcome, and that they would feel comfortable with what the final product was. And so that's why, and it was really important also with the institutions to be able to get them on board, and also with the publicity surrounding it, you know, getting reporters in to scrutinize it, have a look, broadcast it, say this is good, say this is why it's good. And the protocol itself is endorsed by the global heads of arbitration of each of our firms, which carries with it quite significant weight considering who our global heads respectively are. So I think the process is going to be organic. It's something that's unique to arbitration as opposed to something like litigation, in that it is all party based. So we just do need that buy-in. So how we're hoping it will kind of all roll out. And the great thing about a protocol also is that it is malleable. So as things progress and as technology progresses, we can also update the protocol accordingly.
So your stakeholders of law firms, your stakeholders of international arbitration bodies have been brought in. You talked about tech providers. I am curious as to how they responded to this initiative. I suppose it depends on whether you're supporting a piece of tech or saying it's rubbish. So, you know, what was your not talking about you, Sally, we're talking about others, okay?
Well, I can see there's a couple of them on the call, so we need to be very careful with what we say.
How was that with the tech providers? Illuminate us a little on that.
I think it was well received from what I heard. Maria, please tell me if you think differently. But I think that, as I said in the beginning, part of the protocol was actually designing it for the tech providers in mind, which is why what Maria was talking about with having that translation with our tech specialists was really important, because what we want to show to the tech providers is we're the users of arbitration and we're the users of this technology, and this is what we need. We don't need that. If it's not mentioned in the protocol, don't worry about putting it in your piece of tech. But if you're missing this, that could be quite crucial. But Maria, do you have any other thoughts about that?
I mean, I totally agree. I think all the feedback we had generally, actually not just technology providers, and not to sort of blow our own trumpet, it was quite positive feedback. And the other thing I just wanted to add, it touches on both of those questions actually, the enforceability thing and the input from the tech providers. One of the things that we tried to make clear in the protocol is that it is guidance. It's meant to be aspirational. It's not meant to be prescriptive, because again, going back to the nature of arbitration, you can't account for every situation. You can't assume even a base level of experience, even a certain availability of technology even. So it has to be fully flexible. And so that's another reason why sort of enforcing it maybe isn't quite the right way of thinking about it. And in terms of the tech, what it does is, by being flexible, you know, hopefully we're going to encourage different ways of answering the same question, different types of technology, and each one will suit a different individual circumstance.
Great. Now we're going to move on. I've had a good question from Larry. Larry, I'm going to come back to it in the Q&A, so thank you for that, and I'll post that back. But just to provide a different counterpoint now and look at the second project, and we'll get back to these questions a little bit later. We're going to look at a technology-driven project and the work also within legal, so the AIR platform. Sally is the CEO and founder. We're going to come to you first. So tell us all about the tech, and then Tara's going to tell us about its application within legal.
Right. If you don't mind, I'm going to start with the problem as well, because just to bring it to life a little bit. So we were invited. By the way, this all came together thanks to Innovate UK, and I must say this loud and clear. I was invited to the data access program to attend, where we sat down. It was lawyers, it was technology companies, and policy and academia. And everybody in the room, and I think from the attendees would probably also understand this, everybody understands that accessing data is a problem, right? Whether you're a tech company who wants to access the data to develop a new algorithm, whether you're a law firm who wants to get that algorithm, but you don't actually trust who you're going to have to give the data to so that the algorithm can learn, whether you're an in-house, regardless of who you are, you need data access. So that's the first problem. Then let's define data for a second, because that's also important. So you've got different types of data. You've got data that's completely open, and you've got data that's completely closed. On the legal sector, you're going to be more likely in this segment. But a solution that works for this and a solution that works for that doesn't exist. And in fact, there aren't enough solutions for that bit. We designed the AIR platform to tackle the entire spectrum. So the way that it relates to the first program, to the first project, for example, is that in the context of an arbitration, you're going to have different people who need to access different data sets in different contexts. So we designed the AIR platform so that it would tackle all of it. But what is really unique about it, and let me say it what it is, it's a privacy-preserving data access platform. So what that means is that even in the instance of extremely closed data where you can't share it, you still might need to get, in fact, there are thousands of cases where you would want to get the insight from that data. As lawyers, generally, it's, well, what's the market standard for this clause? What's the market standard for that type of agreement in that sector? As lawyers, we get asked these questions all the time. From a policy perspective, you want to know what has the impact been of this kind of situation. Again, you don't care about who was impacted precisely. You don't care about the agreement precisely, but you do want to develop an insight of the entire market position. So that's what we designed the AIR platform to do. The technology itself doesn't quite matter. I can tell you what the names of it are, but actually for this audience or for it doesn't quite matter, because it's a combination of multiple technologies. So for those that are interested, we've got blockchain, we've got federated learning, we've got encryption, we've got differential privacy. It actually doesn't matter, because what matters is how you're using them to achieve what purpose. And that purpose is to keep the data private and to allow organizations in a co-opetition, I love that word, in a co-opetition circumstance to work together for the greater good. And the greater good is usually shared. So by giving the example of what's market, I think every law firm wants to know that. So that's the 2-minute intro into the AIR platform.
So interesting concepts about this open data, closed private data.
That's right.
But a technology stack, if you like, that comes together to make the closed data available in certain ways.
No, insight from the data.
But still fundamentally closed.
That's right. It's the insight from the data, but not the personal identifiable information, not the names of the clients, not the names of the law firms, not the transaction specific, just the insight.
Well, Tara, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that's useful and has been used or is being used at Ashurst and some of the application of that?
Sure. And I mean, I think, as Sally said, as a law firm and anyone on the call who has had experience working in a law firm in any capacity will know that a central tenet of how we operate is that client data is sacrosanct. And all of our processes and procedures are based around protecting client data. A failure in that area would be catastrophic on multiple levels. So, we have seen a proliferation of new technology enter our industry, and in particular, more advanced technologies, next generation technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and those technologies and their advancement within our industry are really underpinned by access to data, learning from the information sitting within an organization. And at present and up until now, the insights law firms have been able to glean using these next generation technologies has been necessarily limited by the data we hold within our own organizations. And that's great. And for those law firms that are advanced enough to be using technologies in that way, they've been able to leverage them to their benefit and to their clients' benefit. But from a client perspective, they have pockets of data trapped in individual law firms. And it would really require the client to proactively go out to all those law firms and say, I'm looking for this information. I need each of you to compile all of that together individually and then send it to me, and I'll aggregate and figure out what that means. Or say, I need all of you to compile it individually and then somehow come together to aggregate and figure out what it means and then deliver that product to me. There's no other way to do that right now. And so when I got introduced to Sally actually quite a while ago, that was a problem that has been on our mind within Ashurst for a long period of time. And I've talked to clients about that problem and the challenges we have in trying to meet that with the existing technology solutions available to us. And the concept of the AIR platform and removing that barrier of having to actually share data and move to the concept of allowing access and extracting anonymized and aggregated insights. I think immediately, you think of all the possibilities of things we could finally do, ways we can be working within the industry and collaboratively to not just for the greater good, but of course there's law to law, law to business, and law to consumer and individual benefits across the piece. So there's multiple layers, I think, in terms of the possible advantages of working collaboratively, as well as I think, and I think this is really essential, creating these industry level solutions rather than everyone trying to come out with their own version of the same thing, using common infrastructure like the AIR platform to create industry level solutions that we can all then, adapt and use for our own specific purposes, but have ultimate control over the data, what we're giving access to, and how people are able to access it. That ticks all of our boxes from a compliance, security, privacy perspective. Opens up the world, in my opinion, in terms of what we can do as law firms, and then what we can do at an industry level as well.
So for the audience, there are a few elements that are extremely unique about the AIR platform, but without going into the detail of the technology, but I can explain what it means to you. First of all, by using the AIR platform, your data does not move from your servers. It just stays within your control. What you're effectively saying is you're allowing an algorithm to come to your data, learn the pattern, and take the pattern away. That's it. It doesn't take anything else away. So in the data world, we talk about data sharing and data access. Effectively, when you're talking about, in my language, when I talk about data sharing, it's I had the data, I have now transferred it to somebody else. I have shared it. Today's world, you've lost control of that data. Data access is, I'm still holding it, I haven't left it, I've opened a window for you to come in, take analytics, so a pattern, and then you take the analytics and you go away. And I control if you have access back or not. So that is a fundamental change. The other fundamental change is that in the world of aggregating the data, at some point that data has to, in the tech speak, it has to conform to a specific model. So we call it a common data model, which means that, let's take the example of a date. The date can be written as day, month, year, American, the other way around, 0, 1, 0, 1, and then 4. So everybody has to sit down together and agree what the common format would be. With the AIR platform, you don't have to do that anymore, because it's the algorithm goes to your data in its exact, wherever it is, however it looks, and it takes the learnings away. So that's a very high pain point operationally when dealing with data. And the final one, which everybody hates, is you don't have to redact your document. That is a massive pain point. So this is why we're finding, and I mean, Tara and I were continuously talking to new people, and everybody's like, oh gosh, we could use it for this, we could use it for that. I'd really like to hear from the audience what they think they could use it for.
That's a very good point, Sally. We've got some questions. I'll encourage you now just to start throwing more of the questions in as we come just to the last 20 minutes of our session. But Sally, Tara, it sounds like a no-brainer, right? Why wouldn't everybody be diving into this with a surety? So my question, one of the questions through now is, okay, so where the SRA, the Law Society, the regulators, actually the GDPR Act, and how it comes in. Where are you with those discussions or interactions with those bodies? Because people might listen and say, well, that sounds great, but I need the regulator or I need the SRA to tell me I can do this.
As they should, and we fully agree. So the Financial Conduct Authority is a collaborator on our project. So we've got a regulator already. And in fact, we've been working with the FCA even before the company was born. So, and my background as a regulator means that there's no way that we're not doing this with the regulators on board. And there are multiple elements. So you've got not just the regulators on the SRA, Law Society, ICO, because you've also got the ICO. I would say watch that space. I wish I could tell you, but right now I can't. For the solution to have mass adoption, we need to have a tick from them. So, and we're working on that. The next one also is ISO certification. So that's the other one. And it's all in the pipeline.
So a good journey with the Financial Conduct Authority and now moving into the legal sphere. Tara Ashurst, what are the business applications for this? What are the sort of the business case, the business drivers? Why invest in this, spend time in that? What do you see just from an Ashurst point of view, and then we'll try and open that up to others.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's actually two different ways to look at it. I think, again, firstly, again, in our industry right now, up until we all got stuck in lockdown a little under a year ago, a lot of us were still operating with physical copies of documents stored after they were finalized and signed, or documents saved onto CD drives or thumb drives, and growing proliferation, of course, of PDF versions and electronic copies, but just reams and reams and reams of this data sitting around our firm physically or electronically. And unless a firm has a really fantastic document management and data repository system established, the ability to actually say, okay, I've had a new client come to me and ask me a question. Say they're in the telecom space, they're entering into a really key IT supplier agreement. I need to understand for telecoms, for this type of business, in this jurisdiction, what are the key service level arrangements that I should be pushing for my client? How I would normally do that would be to be like, okay, let me call up the people I know that work on these types of agreements. Let me call up some people in this jurisdiction. Hi, do you have any example of agreements? This is what I'm doing. They may or may not have something. I'll do a little bit of a trawl through our document system, trying to find some relevant precedents that I think might be useful. And then, I might dump that on another associate to be like, can you figure out what all of this means and make some sense of it and understand what we should be saying to our client is market practice, or that, is standard for things we've agreed before. With something like the AIR platform, we could automate that. We can work with Sally's team to say, we need an algorithm that goes into our document management system, identifies all of the IT supplier contracts in this jurisdiction, in this industry, and then lets me know what these 5 key provisions what the trend is, or what they say. What does that sort of chart look like in terms of how I should be thinking about negotiating these? And when my client asks me, okay, well, my counterparty is pushing for this, what's standard, Tara? I can actually say to them with some confidence, well, in the past agreements we've agreed it's gone in this direction, or this has been the range. So that's an initial immediate, just making me look smarter, sound smarter, actually learn and get the benefit of all of the amazing expertise in the entirety of my firm that I don't have inside my head, and actually plucking it out of their head and putting it at my fingertips. And then as soon as you have that, you can think about, how can I make this available to my client? My client doesn't want to call me up every single day. My client just wants to have access to those insights. So how do I flip that around and commercialize it in a way that my client sees some value in it, and maybe might be willing to pay me for access to those insights? And a lot of law firms right now publish PDFs and articles containing these types of insights. There are industry-wide surveys that happen, by a range of industry bodies doing things like this. We can work towards collectivizing these insights, where it not only just benefits me in my practice, Ashurst as a firm, but also at that industry level, that public interest level of, a great example would be, okay, we know that there's a whole category of people who are just never going to pay for legal services. They couldn't pay if they wanted to, but they're vulnerable. And when they're being asked to sign up to terms for X, Y, and Z, they should have some resources at their fingertips to understand how to best protect themselves as they can without paying a lawyer. Can we create a level of that at an industry level with all of us together saying, okay, if you're signing a mortgage, here's some key things you should know. This is what's standard. This is what's market practice for your area, your region, etc. And could we make something like that even available for free, working in collaboration potentially with regulators? Again, to make legal services more accessible, to give that greater protection to consumers, and for me, individually, and I think as a firm, to be part of something like that, where we're elevating legal services from, particularly commercial legal services, from pure B2B, revenue profit-driven business, to actually, how do we make legal services be recognized as actually, because it's underpinning society. Access to legal services underpins society in a variety of ways. And how can we, still doing with our B2B hat, or be thinking about the other ways we can leverage all of this great expertise, knowledge, and insight in much more efficient ways than we would if we said, okay, let's spin up a project and get 20 people doing this, to actually also be contributing back into the wider community.
So Tara, bringing the two projects together and looking at how they come together and draw over it, it sounds to me that although the AIR platform has benefits just inside of Ashurst, the power of this becomes more as more data, more law firms come on board, perhaps even actually regulators and others that have their own data sets, and the courts on law precedent and other things. So how do we do that? How do you actually do what Ashurst and Delray Piper and the other 4 or 5 have done, of coming together to get a start, sort of jumpstart the project and the direction? What do you think is next for yourselves in doing that?
I mean, from my perspective, the start is just the start, and our approach to collaboration has very much been about find the coalition of the willing, find the handful of other law firms who are like-minded, who understand the power of innovation and the importance of working together to actually try to tackle some of the challenges, and just try to do something small. And a lot of us work in MVPs and proof of concepts and pilots. Just do something small, tightly scoped, which helps alleviate some of the concerns the organization might have about diving into a new technology or a new area. Tightly scope it, make it as small but impactful as possible, so that you prove the capability, you prove what the technology can do, you prove the value to the organization and to clients or to who else. And then you sing from the rooftops what you've done, and then you. In most cases, suddenly people start piling in and say, I want to understand how that worked. I see how this could work in an adjacent area or in another industry, and it starts to grow from there.
We have attendees today from a whole range of law firms, and it's clear that the larger law firms who invest in entire divisional areas or business areas, quite focused on this form of innovation, can move forward. But actually, the majority of lawyers and legal information is actually based in smaller law firms throughout the UK that make up actually 90% of the market. Therefore, are there barriers where cost and investment, and really this is to you, Sally, where maybe the big players can afford to get involved, commercially get involved, but for the majority of this data is in the much smaller law firms, their business case for investment is a little different. So are there barriers there, Sally?
It's an excellent question. So I can give a parallel. One of the collaborators on the AIR platform is an accountancy firm called Wilson Wright. They're a mid to small, and they are part of a network, a larger network, which is the DFK network of even smaller accountancies. And with them, so the problem that they're tackling is that they, as a group, private company valuations is quite opaque, because what happens is that an accountant gives a valuation to a private company. That private company is not listed. Nobody has access to it. It's gone. You've only got access to your own data as a law firm, as an accountancy, as a law firm is the same parallel. You've only got access to your own information. So therefore, you can never develop a market view. There's no external resources, none of it. So with Wilson Wright, we started developing just with them. And again, this one in this instance is covered by Innovate UK from a costing perspective. We proved that the algorithm would work. We developed the tool that they would then consume. They invited a few of the people. We say that you collaborate with individuals, you don't collaborate with organizations. So they invited a few of their close collaborators. We're now adding we're connecting them to the AIR platform, and then jointly, all of their data now can be analyzed and analytics extracted from it. And then we're going to spin it off to the wider group. That's it. You just do it in phases. So that just mirrors what Tara says. You just do it in phases. And the cost is actually not that high. And there are multiple ways that you can do it. You can do it through a membership fee. It really does depend on the preferences. And that's the other thing that's good about the AIR platform, is that the pricing model is, we don't have a set way of pricing it. It is flexible depending on the relationship between the parties who want to cooperate.
Super, Sally. Now we've only got 7 minutes left, and we have some more questions that's coming, and I'm determined to try and get through them. So please, just try and be as punchy as you can with your answers. We're going to start with Larry, and it goes back to the protocols. The protocol appears to be like justice achieved at the lawyer of the internet by agreement of the parties. Can this provide a model for other bottom-up justice devices achieved without regard to borders, i.e. privacy, AI, ethics, etc.? If Maria, can you pull something from that?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a crack at that. Look, I think that the protocol works in arbitration because, as we said, it is a party-led dispute resolution process. I think when we're talking about things like ethics, for example, it's slightly different, because the ethics in relation to legal practitioners is governed by bodies in different jurisdictions. So if you're talking about trying to get some type of justice from a bottom-up perspective without borders, I think that would be much more difficult to achieve than what we're doing with the arbitration protocol, just because they're very different concepts. Now, that doesn't exclude the possibility of a much more universal approach to things like ethics, compliance, security, etc., because a theme in our world is obviously globalization, and the way that we are increasingly trading, cross-border trading movement of people, maybe not so much in the UK anymore, but elsewhere. And there does need to be, more harmony between different rules. But I think that's kind of a more natural process of, if different jurisdictions and different states want to ensure that parties feel safe to have their disputes heard in that jurisdiction, or have a really robust ethics compliance procedure for their lawyers, then it's for the state, with the pressure of the people involved, to ensure that their rules are universally accepted. So I think it's slightly different, but I agree, I think there's still everything is becoming much more universal, and there will be much more pressure on particular jurisdictions and particular regulators to ensure that whatever rules that they put in place are harmonious with others. Maria, I'm not sure if you had anything else on that.
Only briefly to say that I think that it can be a kind of blueprint for similar projects where it's about identifying a type of practice, or like here we did, a type of a requirement that's universal and that kind of transcends the needs of individual jurisdictions, and where you can identify those kind of issues. I agree that this can sort of form the sort of vanguard of that kind of thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I interject on this one, David? Yeah. So, Larry, I absolutely love your question. That sounds like an academic question to me. If you're not talking about distributed ledgers, I'd be very surprised, because that's exactly where this sounds like, and it sounds like peer-to-peer dispute resolution or automated dispute resolution. If you wanted to explore this further, I've got loads. We can do a whole talk about this. Do reach out to me privately. I absolutely love his question.
There you go, Larry. You've had the offer there. I encourage you to pick that up. Now, let's move on quickly while we've just got a few minutes. Question from Tim Wallace. And I think this comes to the earlier point we were talking about on the AIR platform. What type of governance is required and available to keep such processes transparent, fair, and ethical? Who watches the watchers?
Again, it's an excellent question. So let me talk about our design. So the AIR platform is not designed to decide what the governance is. It actually assumes that the governance is set by the participants. That is a policy question to my mind. And I think that it should absolutely stake to being transparent, fair, and ethical. Whether there's another body that needs to be created to look at the automation of systems, that is a massive policy question. Again, if you wanted to have more debate on what's going on, I'm happy to answer those. There's lots on that subject, lots.
Great. Now, Sid, I think it was more a statement from Sid rather than a question, but it was regarding barriers for smaller firms for virtual document management. There are arbitration solutions available for as little as 500 quid a month. I think that was going back to what we were talking about in terms of affordability. I think, Sally, you might argue that what we're talking about here is maybe a little different than off-the-shelf products, but I don't want to.
And I mean, he's talking about virtual documents management, which is not quite the same thing. I think he's talking about a completely different area. We're not in the documents management space at all. That's not what this is about.
With Sid's point, I think it's a good point in terms of perhaps how, with the protocol and the encouragement of universal application of online tools, that sets it up for data to be more readily accessible, perhaps in a universal way. So I agree. I think what Sid's talking about is completely different to what you guys are talking about, but it does show that, if you have the steps along the process, people can participate at different levels.
We assume that they are needed. So, the documents management is absolutely needed. So we're talking about automating the governance, because a single piece of data can be accessed in different ways for different purposes. So,
lovely. Well, listen, I don't want to cut you off there, Sally, because as you said, we could go for hours. We could absolutely continue. But we're very disciplined here at Net Law Media. We keep things spot on. We know people have to move on. But what I will say is thank you very much to each of the speakers for your contributions. I hope that the listeners and viewers have been illuminated, and thank you for your questions. I hope you took something away from this. I'd like to say this is the first discussion of 2021 produced by Net Law Media. It's been a pleasure hosting this, and I'm very pleased to confirm that the next session, the next Tech Talk, will be held live next week on the 20th of January. So be sure to sign up and subscribe. From us, it's time to say goodbye and thank you very much.